there's a gap in being able to track back how this initial seed money actually gets generated. And there's also a level of deniability if anyone sort of tracks it back to a particular gift card, then it becomes very easy to sort of say, well, actually it was delivered to my address as a gift, so I have no idea where it actually came from, I just used it. Now, foreign bank accounts is an important part. So, if you're going to go beyond botnets that are just focused on spam and DDoS and things like that, and actually seeking to make literally millions of dollars, the key feature really is how am I going to be able to take all that information, all the monies that are being generated from fraud purposes or for other online systems where I am selling or doing other transactions of the data that's being stolen from the bot victims. How do I get that back into a real bank account? Now, it's not like you really want to use your home banking online services and your ATM machine to try bring the money back. So looking at foreign banking accounts, so many of the guys, and there's plenty of advice on really where the best places are to open up foreign bank accounts. And looking at three an example. So one that gets talked about an awful lot about Swiss numbered accounts. Frankly, Swiss numbered accounts don't really exist anymore. It's actually all traceable back to the people themselves. So there are alternative versions that go by a little bit of the name of the Swiss numbered accounts, but you have to go in person to the banks themselves and open up, and you have to validate who you are. Meanwhile, other things like the Cayman accounts, you can actually open up the accounts online. And one of the interesting ones I was looking at was the Panama Bearer Share Corporation accounts. So you can actually set up online, remotely, a licensed corporate entity in Panama, which comes with a bank account. Because of their banking regulations, that is never attributable back to the person who actually set up the organization. But there are bilateral agreements. So when it comes to particular types of frauds, regardless of all these types of numbered accounts or anonymous accounts, all the details about those accounts and the holding of the monies that are inside those accounts can be frozen based on bilateral agreements covering the fraud between the different countries, which will result in disclosure of the owners, and also means that as a bad guy, you want to stay away from the classic fraud techniques. All of these types of accounts also come with credit cards and online banking capabilities, so all the things that you need. And of course, when it comes to retirement planning, if you're based in the US, there are plenty of countries that have non-extradition, and highlighted a few countries there are probably more amenable to a high standard of living once you actually move there. On the business plan side, when I was looking at this particular topic, building the $6 million man, more from the cybernetics side, if you like, and things, taking a one-year snapshot and looking at how many of these organizations have built up their botnets and their businesses, that first year is pretty much crucial to them. And when you have a closer look, it's pretty much standard sort of MBA business development advice that you'll see, and the types of plans that they evolve there. So if you're looking at something like $6 million and you could follow a quarterly plan, then really what you see is this. Each quarter you double your revenue opportunity, and you gradually increase your revenue, increase your margin. And when you look at the early stages, they're actually building the botnets and bringing in the money is actually fairly low. There are high costs, high cost of goods, if you like, building that particular first botnets. But as you build a botnet on top of a botnet, then you start to become your own service provider for many of the features, which reduces the cost of actually running those botnets. So if you work out aiming for about $6 million in revenue, then the common sort of turnaround for the guys that are actually running this is $1.25 million after not so much taxes, but all the other costs of providing services. But when it comes to getting started in the botnets, it's really about courage. It's not really for the faint-hearted getting involved and getting started in the botnet business. And many of the guys that got started in the botnet businesses were that have met have been disenchanted with their professional careers as sysadmins or pen testers or QSAs. So looking at the very first botnet that these guys tend to build, they tend to start off with an off-the-shelf DIY construction kit, so things like Zeus, SpyEye, Butterfly, names can go on. And one of the easiest ways to really test the waters in building a botnet really are things about seeding torrents and newsgroups. So they're low volume, and it's a slow way of building up the botnets. However, they are very reliable. Key features, though, anonymous submission is very difficult to trace back. It doesn't rely on any type of hosting infrastructure, so there's no cost to you once you've uploaded your particular malware. And there's a natural propagation infection, and actually, most of your victims from this particular vector are ideal candidates for having home systems that are up for long hours and are in general poor states of health and are very easy to manipulate and use as reliable building blocks for more sophisticated botnets. And of course, a key feature for these first botnets are making use of free services. So dynamic DNS and all the providers are ideal for command and control in these early stages, as they allow for free and anonymous DNS hosting. Now, I wanted to quickly just show one of the kits. So this is a SpyEye, and the top left is the part of the management console, version 1.2. And of course, it comes with all the default features, all the statistics, the ability to upload and download new commands and new malware to all of the infected hosts as part of your botnet. It also has other interesting features from a fraud perspective of automatic screen grabbing, which has its own scripting language to decide on which particular parts of screens and web pages are being monitored. Bank of America grabber here for credentials, and also certificate grabbers, so for the stealing of client-side certificates, VPN credentials. It also comes with a whole management console, and here we see on the right-hand side a list of all the countries and the victims in this particular botnet, and also tracks what version of the malware is actually distributed on there. So you can make sure that all the hosts and all the victims of the botnet receive the latest updates. And the bottom left here is one of the newer consoles, or a flavor of the SpyEye consoles that we're seeing hanging around today. So there's sort of a change of icons as different operators tune their management consoles and provide additional value-add services. Now, the hierarchy for these early botnets, these first starter botnets, is pretty simple. Multiple command and control servers. The botnet agent is typically communicating over HTTP, and the service is paid for via the reward and rebate cards. Now, when you look at the flow of information, so you have your bot master, the guy running the laptop in the local Starbucks, changing their MAC address every couple of hours or something, or changing operations. Doing it by free Wi-Fi, connecting to anonymous services, Tor networks, or making use of free and leased anonymizing botnets or anonymizing services, then connecting to those command and control servers. Now, the conversation between the bot master and those first tier command and control servers are all encrypted. On the other side, so from those command and control servers now communicating with the botnets, which may or may not be encrypted. In fact, most of the time what we'll see is that there's no need to actually encrypt the communication between the victim machines, the bot agents, and the command and control server. Instead, what happens is that the files and configuration files and any communications are actually encrypted on the host, on the victim machine, and then they're shuffled up through HTTP. So there's no need for encrypting the actual channel itself. The advantage of that is that you don't get caught by filtering technologies, and it's a lot harder to spot once it's hidden in general HTTP traffic. Now, the infection rates vary, and now I've picked some idealized version just to sort of represent, provide a graphic representation of the different techniques for growing and building botnets. So I think when you talk about drive-by downloads, so drive-by downloads get an awful lot of press, and everyone's very worried about the drive-by downloads as an infection vector. And when you look at how it's used for building botnets, then actually it has a slow ramp in actually infecting hosts. And by the time it starts, coming up to a very good rate of infecting hosts and building up victims, it tends to get noticed and shut down. And because you're reliant on a web service, once it's shut down, then you lose all control of that botnet, of all those agents, and so there's no more further infection. Meanwhile, things like the spam URLs or spam attachments have a lot longer life cycle. They're easier to detect, they have lower yields on infections, but they do tend to last a lot longer and they can't be shut off automatically. One of the ones, this red line on the bottom, which I think is interesting, has the lowest yield today, is really the instant messenger chat sessions. Because of many of the agents that are being used for distributing infectious URLs and things like that through chat messages are automated. They're bots that sit inside those channels, but they're also using, they're bots that sit on victim machines and inject content into the instant messenger messages that the real human is actually using. And so there's a high social engineering coefficient on that, which means that it tends to last for a very, very long time. It's very difficult to shut off. A key feature, though, if you actually want and need to grow your botnet business, is all about reputation. So, like I said, the botnets are just the tool. Now, getting access and being able to do things and actually monetizing the larger parts of the botnet and botnet services means that you need to have a reputation underground. Okay, so the reputation is based on peer trust. Okay. And to be able to establish that, you need to be a frequent user and a poster on various hacking and botnet forums, and you need to be able to provide a lot of free stuff originally to sort of build up that reputation. Getting away, so many of these forums will be in various language, foreign countries, but frankly it doesn't really matter if you use Google Translator because everyone speaks poor local language no matter what. And no one really minds too much the fact that you can't speak the local language, and there's a lot of Google Translator being used in these forums. So language is not so much a problem with actually dealing with these forums and actually building up the reputations. You'll also find, as you build up the reputation, you'll have better access to particular types of tools and technologies for enhancing your botnet and the malware that's actually there. A key thing also about building up the reputation means that it opens up a few more routes to and how you're actually going to pay for services. So a lot of things will focus on non-revocable money transfers, so Western Union type stuff, volumes of stolen credentials. So the things that you're actually stealing from the botnet become a bartering currency. And of course the botnet itself, so segmenting those up. And so, when you go to many of these types of sites and start digging down, everything's like star rated. So, you build up your reputation, and you can validate particular people that you're going to be doing business with based on their reputation, and if you like, many of the endorsements that are being provided there. But it's also important that you have to build up the reputation to be able to access certain areas and certain forums and access certain types of tools. So many of these types of forums typically start off with just a number of postings, and some of the postings can be quite high. So many of the the Balkan area Russian-speaking forums will have like a threshold of about 100 posts before you can actually see any of the sort of botnet-related talk, and about 500 to 1,000 posts on these boards before you can get into any of the monetization, any of the carding forums, or any of the data transfer forums. So once you've sort of moved on to that first generation botnet, and the botnet grows, there's new demands. So more botnets, more spreading, more detection. So it becomes more important about how you're actually deploying botnets and the agents themselves. So the malware also becomes more sophisticated, adding more features. So pulling back stored data, keylogging, keyword sniffing, harvesting more data, and particular data that is saleable. We see an awful lot in the press about stealing Facebook credentials, login credentials, and all those, and they have a value. But frankly, looking at the classic email addresses and anything else that can provide personal identifiable information actually has a growing value, and I'll spend a fair bit of time actually talking at the how that personal information is actually monetized. So the malware components become